If you'd like to turn to Mark chapter 5, we're going to read from verse 21 to 34. The Gospel according to Mark, chapter 5, verse 21. And when Jesus was passed over again by ship unto the other side, much people gathered unto him, and he was nigh unto the sea. And behold, there cometh one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name. And when he saw him, he fell at his feet, and besought him greatly, saying, My little daughter lieth at the point of death. I pray thee, come and lay thy hands on her, and she may be healed, and she shall live. And Jesus went with him, and much people followed him, and thronged him. And a certain woman, which had an issue of blood 12 years, and had suffered many things of many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was nothing bettered, but rather grew worse. Before I continue on, just a little aside. Not only did this woman suffer a lot, actually later on in the same, a few verses later, it calls her affliction a plague. The translator used that word to translate what she was going through. But it also made her, under the law, unclean, ceremonially unclean, which means she had to stay away from people because whoever she touched or whatever she touched also became unclean. So not only was she suffering physically, but also emotionally and socially with all the separation that she was under. So this woman grew worse rather than better. But when she had heard of Jesus, came in the press behind and touched his garment. For she said, If I may touch but his clothes, I shall be whole. And straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that plague. And Jesus immediately, knowing in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned him about in the press and said, Who touched my clothes? And his disciples said unto him, Thou seest the multitude thronging thee, and sayest thou, Who touched me? And when he looked round about to see her that had done this thing, but the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what was done in her, came and fell down before him and told him all the truth. And he said unto her, Daughter, thy faith has made thee whole. Go in peace and be whole of thy plague. Have you guys ever been in a large crowds before where you felt like you're crowded in and people are pressing you in? You know, I've been in a few of those, but one of the things I remember, I'm sure I told this before, when I was younger, oftentimes I had to go, being the oldest in the family, I had to go looking for food because at that time, living in Romania, there's not a lot of food in the stores. You couldn't just show up at the grocery store and just go by the aisle and select whatever you wanted because the shelves were empty, basically. So you had to go certain times when the food was coming. So like, for example, milk. Milk was only available at 6:30 in the morning, and you had to wait in line. And if they had enough milk and not enough people, and you were, among the first ones, you got milk. Otherwise, you had to go till next day, and so on. So I was looking for eggs this one day. It was about 12, 13 or so, and I heard that they might have eggs at the store somewhere in town. So I went there, waited in line, and yes, there was a crowd of people all waiting, for the line to open, for the door to open, so they can go in and buy the eggs. And at the moment the door opened, everybody starts shoving in at the same time, trying, like Black Friday. Sometimes they show here. Everybody tried to go in, and they started to push me against the wall. I was 12 years old or 13, so I didn't want to get squeezed there, so I pushed back. I put my my foot against the wall and pushed back as hard as I could. So that was one time when I was pressed in from all sides, and I can imagine, maybe not exactly the same way, but a similar way, the people were around Jesus, pressing, trying to be around him, hear what he had to say. Recently, when we were on our trip, I was in Germany, and there's a lot more people in towns, and you will go through in downtown or the town center, and there's a lot of people walking. But on this occasion, it was a train that had been delayed. That was delayed. There was a part of the track that had broken down, so one line was broken down. So all those people came into the train that I was going in a different direction because they wanted to make a detour. And all of a sudden, the train got very, very, very packed. And in Germany, you can bring your bikes onto the train. So people had, there was a couple of guys with the bikes right behind me. So I couldn't move to the left. I couldn't move. It was just basically surrounded, crowded by people. Even if when the train takes curves, even then I just, I didn't move too much because I was propped by the persons next to me. I was, so on top, so crowded. The person who was sitting, the young woman who was sitting on a chair, I could see what she was doing on her phone. She was switching between TikTok, Snapchat, messaging, what else? There's a Facebook, Twitter, back to Snapchat, back to TikTok. It's like, wow, for the whole 20 minutes, I don't think she put her phone down. She kept going back and forth. But anyway, I was in that kind of crowd before, and hopefully maybe you've been too. But that's the way it was when Jesus was around. People wanted to hear what he had to say because it was something different. It says, not like our teachers taught, because he taught with authority. So this evening, I'd like to look at this passage here, talking about touching Jesus, but not just in any way, right? Not just touching him in a certain, but touching him with a certain purpose and a certain desire, as the woman did. So a couple of things, there's 4 main points I want to bring out. But one is that in this passage here in Mark, it doesn't tell us how old the daughter was, but in the parallel passages of Jairus, in the parallel passages, it tells us that she was 12 years old. And so 12-year-old kids can have problems too, right? She was sick. She was suffering this illness. And we know that problems come to young people too, right? But the problems come to the young and to the old alike. Now, this woman, she was sick 12 years. Just as long as that girl was alive, that's how long her illness was going on. So we know that problems and situations come to the young and to old alike. Life happens, but we have a God who's in control that we can go to. And he answers for the young and for the old. Actually, back in those days, a lot of kids died in infancy. If they survived to 5 years old, that was a good sign. It was a good indicator that most likely that person, that kid, would continue on living their life to the average life expectancy at that time. So if they made it past those few early years, that was good. This girl had made it past that, but then she became sick as she was older, at 12 years old. But we know the rest of the story, which we're not focusing on, that Jesus, after she died, she was sick, and eventually she died, but the Lord Jesus brought her back to life. He did that because her father asked Jesus to come to his house. We thank God that Jesus makes house calls, that Jesus answers our prayers wherever we are, as we heard this evening. Now, as I mentioned, older people have problems too. Mom and dad have troubles too, problems in their life. Teachers have problems. Leaders have problems too. But God is the same for all. God is the one who can help and answer the situations. The second point is the fact that this woman's sickness, again, as I mentioned, was for a very long time. And it says that she spent a lot of money, basically all that she had, all the money that she had made, all the things that she had saved up, she spent it on her illness, to the doctors, right? She didn't buy clothes or things like that, really, that she needed, or any extra fun things. She had to spend just to get well, and it didn't help. Actually, she said it got worse rather than better, right? I'm not sure if you ever gone to the doctor and you came out worse than when you left, but hopefully not. But back in those days, medicine had a lot to be desired of. Being in Germany, some of those castles that we visited had museums. They called them sometimes apothecary museums, like drugstore museums. And you could see some of the concoctions and some of the things they made and gave people. And a lot of the things they gave people actually were very bad. Things that contained arsenic or things that contained lead. and actually made them much worse than they were before. And I saw some of their instruments. They look more like torture instruments rather than healing instruments. But so I can understand when it says here that going to the doctors actually made her worse instead of improving her situation. It didn't help her at all. The remedies that they brought, instead of alleviating, it made it worse. We thank the Lord for the advancement in medicine since then, that things are much better today in a lot of ways. But anyway, she spent all her money and she didn't get better. But she heard about Jesus. She heard about Jesus. Aren't you glad that you heard about Jesus? I was just thinking before service when I was considering this passage, and I was thinking, also asked you the question, can you imagine how your life would be like if you hadn't heard about Jesus? As I can imagine, I was trying to think, okay, where would I be today if I hadn't heard about Jesus? And I cannot come up with a full picture of where that could, but one thing I know for sure, that would have been much worse than what I'm today. I would have been much worse off in many aspects in life. So we're thankful that we can hear about Jesus in many, many ways. We hear about Jesus in Sunday school. That's one of the reasons we have Sunday school, is so we can learn more about who Jesus is. We hear about Jesus at Bible studies. And again, we invite you and encourage you to tune in for that or come to church when we have it. You can do it from home. It's very easy, right? To go on Zoom there. We hear it on Sundays and services, morning and evening services. We hear about the Lord, about God's goodness. We hear about Jesus during special meetings, during camp meetings. We have all these opportunities to hear about Jesus, and we're very thankful for that. This woman heard about Jesus, and she decided that one day was going to be different, that she was going to go and see what he could do for her, and she did just that. No doubt she was in a weakened condition. When you are sick, right, whether it's, illness, flu, or whatever condition, you don't feel well. As somebody mentioned that they went to camp meeting and they came back, with COVID. And even this year, I don't think I had this year, but last year, I remember, oh man, I had 4 days of feeling, flu-like and sick like that. It's not fun, even for something so, mild, really, as a flu. Imagine being sick for 12 years. Right? And her body, as I mentioned, emotional and even socially, how she was considered had to be unclean and she had to be separated. But she decided to go and meet Jesus and see where Jesus was. And it was a big crowd. No doubt she was wondering, how am I going to get through? How am I going to get through with all those people? Because when you're in a crowd like that, you cannot move. You cannot move them out of the way, right? It tells us that she went from behind somehow, and in another passage, not in this passage, that she touched the hem of his garment, the border of his garment. In those days, men wear like tunics or robes that were long, and they had a border at the bottom, like a hem, and it seems like that's what she touched. Maybe she was reaching down, maybe on her knees or somewhere, just reaching to touch the Lord, because she considered in her mind that if she does that, that's all she wanted, just to touch the hem of his garment. We thank the Lord that whatever we can bring to him, he can make a difference. And not only did she hear about Jesus, but we know that she heard about Jesus, that he could do something about her situation. Because no doubt, if she hadn't heard that Jesus could do something about her situation, she wouldn't have, left home. If it's just another doctor, I've seen enough doctors. Right. I don't want to see another doctor the same way. I need something different. No doubt she heard that something was different about Jesus, how he had healed many other people, and there was something special about the Lord, that he could do something about her situation. Jesus can do something about your situation. He can do something about whatever you're going through. It might not be illness, might not be situations like we talked about here, but it could be whatever you're going through. Jesus can do something about your situation, but we must go to him, right? For this woman, this healing was the last option. She had no other option. She had tried a lot of other things. And some people do just that. They go to Jesus as a last option. They've tried all these other things, sometimes like Keith Green used to say, that he tried all these other things in life to satisfy his life, and at the end he tried Jesus. So a lot of people do that today. They try everything else to satisfy their lives, to make their lives better, and then at the as a last option, they try Jesus. Well, isn't it better to have Jesus as the first option? We don't want to leave Jesus to the last option, but let's make Jesus the first option. The first option for whatever is going on in our lives, for issues, for questions, for problems, let's make Jesus the first option. In her life, it didn't work that way because, that's how her life unfolded. But let's choose Jesus first, make Jesus the first option. So then she touched Jesus, right? The garments, the clothes, and it says immediately she was healed. Amen. Immediately she was healed. Why? Because she didn't just touch Jesus any old way, but she touched Jesus in a special way, right? Even the disciple says, well, there's a lot of people around you. What do you mean, who touched you, right? The other people just touched Jesus incidentally. They're just bumping into him like people were bumping into me when I was in the train, just because we're, civil about each other, even in this space here, closed space. We're not going to, we're going to keep out to ourselves and so on. Doesn't matter if somebody bumps us a little bit, that's okay. That's how those people were touching Jesus, just incidentally, accidentally. We don't want to accidentally just, go to the Lord, but we want to make him our first priority. Have a purpose like this woman had. She was thinking, I heard the stories, and I have this plan. I have this purpose, this idea that I want to go, and even if I cannot ask him, I just want to touch him. She saw the crowd, and no doubt she probably realized, I'm not going to be able to get through him, but if I can maybe just reach out somehow and just touch his clothes, I'm going to be healed. Right? Would you have done that? Would you and I have done that, pushed through all of that and our situation? I pray that God would help us to go to him first, our first option. So she touched the Lord with a purpose. The purpose was backed by faith, as the Lord tells us. Daughter, thy faith has made thee whole. The purpose in her heart was faith. What strengthened her was faith that God could answer her prayer. And God will answer your prayer if you put Jesus first. She heard, no doubt, about the promise. She didn't have the promises, but somehow she believed based on what Jesus said. But we have God's promises. We have the Lord's promises that he's given us, so we can believe, we can reach out to him by faith, believing, because we can trust in his word, in his promises that we have. And then what happened? When she touched him, it says power came out of Jesus. She touched Jesus by faith, and she received strength in her body. She received power not only for that day, but for the rest of her life, right? When we come to God, he gives us power for today. Just like that verse, that's like the song we sang about thy word being a light unto our path, a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path, for today, for the immediate environment, but also for the long term. She received power for that day, and God will give you power for today, but also will give you power for the rest of your life, to continue on till the end of the day. So she received power. So we don't want to touch Jesus just any old way. We want to touch Jesus by faith. Reach out to him by faith, believing that he will bring you through whatever the need is in your life. Need a deeper experience, need an answer for school, for work, for whatever situation. Reach out by faith, and the Lord will touch you. Amen. So reach out to him by faith, and the power of God will make a difference. And not only that she got healed, but it says on the last verse, daughter, thy faith has made thee whole. That word whole sometimes is translated also has saved thee. So not only is the healing, not only what Jesus didn't, Jesus knew what had happened. Jesus knew which woman was that touched him. He just asked because he wanted her to make the choice to present herself and to show exactly what had happened. Remember, when we get saved, we don't just keep it to ourselves, do we? You don't just hide under a bushel, so to say, and say, I'm saved, and I'm staying here for the rest of my life. No, but we share it with others. We tell others, we get up on our own 2 feet and we say, the Lord saved me. We're not embarrassed about it. We're not ashamed about it, but we tell others what God has done for us. And that's what the Lord wanted for this woman, not just to go home and yes, she was touched, but so others can see and be encouraged by her faith, by what she did. And we can be encouraged today. If she did it, 12 years of being sick and emotionally and socially like isolated, how about you? Don't you think that you could touch Jesus and make a difference in your life? Don't you think that you could reach out to Jesus by faith and the power of God can flow from him to you and give you what you need? Yes, Jesus is more than able to do that if we reach to him by faith. And then he says, not only that they have made whole, but says, go in peace. That's what happens when we come before the Lord. We go in peace. I don't know how my life would have turned out, but as I mentioned, I know for sure it would have been worse off than I'm today. And I say that with all straightness, not exaggerating. So I thank God that I met Jesus. And I thank the Lord that tonight we can touch the Lord and he will make a difference in your life. We'll have a time of prayer. Song number is 721. Let's touch the Lord today.